there are two fundamental questions in philosophy, according to Indian thought. First is, who are you? And second is, what is ultimate reality? So here's what I want you to do. Take out a piece of paper, and on one side, answer this first question. Who are you? In other words, if you had to write down in 2 to 3 sentences, fundamentally, who are you? What does it mean to be you? Take a few moments to write that. And then what I want you to do is flip that sheet of paper over and write what is ultimately real in the world. What's behind everything? What is that unchanging source behind all of reality? And so, literally, right now, pause this video and spend a few minutes writing your answer first to who you are, and second of all, on the backside, what is ultimate reality? And when you're done, push play on this video again. So push pause now and do that little exercise. Okay, we're back. Now, how does Hinduism answer these two fundamental questions? First, who are you? Well, a lot of us will say, okay, I don't know, I'm my name. But remember, your name is not something permanent. My name used to be Moffett, and then I got married and I hyphenated it into Lloyd-Moffett. We have some friends who, when their ancestors came over from Greece, they didn't speak any English at all. And so at Ellis Island, they asked, who are you? And they said, well, they thought, what religion are you? And so they said, Christ. Their last name for the last 50 years has been Christ. Now, once they went back to Greece to discover what their real last name, it was Papazachario Papadopoulos. And so they changed their name. But notice, you're not your name. You're not even what you are. I'm a student. Well, that could change. You're not even like, I am a Christian or I am a Jew. Well, statistically speaking, half of you will change your religious designation in your life. And so Hindus wanted something permanent, something real, something that did not change over time. Clearly, you're not your body. I mean, I remember when Basil was a little boy, he spent his entire first summer on my chest as I was studying for PhD exams. Well, now he's taller than me. So you're not your body. And even scientifically speaking, every cell in your body changes, what is it, after every 7 years or something like that. So you're not your body. So who are you? Well, for Hinduism, they want something that's unchanging. They want something that's real, that is not just a construction. So in other words, you could say, I'm my mother's daughter. Well, and that's true, always true of you. It's not changing. But that just begs the question, then, who's your mother? And they want something fundamental. And so the basic question of life, who are you? One option, by the way, is to say there is no you. In fact, as we'll see in Buddhism, this is the fundamental insight of Buddhism, that you think there's a permanent you, that there's an essence that's you. What Buddhism says is that very thought is the problem that causes suffering. And so you have to realize that there is no you. There is no self in Buddhism. But we'll talk about that with Buddhism. For Hinduism, they said the proper answer is ultimately that you are an Atman. You are an Atman. Now, this term just means self. So you are a self. But what are the qualities of the Atman? You are a spiritual essence, is what Hinduism says. Now, what is the Atman? First, it's something that's spiritual. So that means you can't hook up an Atman reader and figure out, there's 50 weights of Atman there. No, it's totally imperceptible. It's spiritual and immaterial. That's who you are. That's your spiritual essence. Second of all, it's eternal, without beginning and end. And this makes it different from a soul. If you understand the concept of soul from Christianity or Judaism or Islam, there was a time in which God created the soul. Not true of the Atman. The Atman has always existed and will always exist. Third, different from a soul, all higher objects have an Atman. In Christianity and Judaism and Islam, there may be a debate about whether dogs have a soul, or dogs go to heaven, but generally speaking, most living things are considered not to have a soul. Does a rat have a soul? Does an ant have a soul? Well, usually that's an unclear question. But in Hinduism, it's clearly true. All objects that have a choice have and Atman. And so, whatever you wrote on that page about who you are, cross it all out right now. In the end, you are none of the things in which you wrote. You are your Atman. You are a spiritual essence in the essence. So, you're an Atman. That's who you are. Now, let's go, what's the ground of all being? What's the foundation of the world? What is real in the world? This is what you wrote on the back page. Well, I want to be clear here that they went through a whole bunch of philosophical mumbo jumbo, but the answer to this question in Hinduism is ultimately Brahman. That is, Brahman is the power underlying everything in the universe. Think of it as the energy behind everything. Now, Brahman is both transcendent and immanent. What do these words mean? Transcendent means that it's beyond everything, that its existence lies not inside only everything, but beyond everything. So it can come from outside to empower things in the world, but it is also immanent. That is, it's within all things. And so you might see it as something like the source and the sustainer of all things. It's the thread that strings things together. It's the hidden and subtle reality that gives existence in the first place. It's being itself. It's the thing that unifies the cosmic substratum. It's the very being of beingness. I don't know, something like that. But it is what's behind everything. Now, some people have tried to say Brahman is like God, but it's not like God, because in Christian, Jewish, and Islamic conceptions, God is personable. God's we speak to it as He, but and give it qualities like God thinks and cares and loves and has justice. Brahman's not like that. It's an impersonal force. That is, it is energy itself. And just like it would be strange to pray to gravity, oh dear gravity, please hold me in place, you wouldn't do that. It would be strange to pray to Brahman. Brahman is behind everything. Now, let me do a quick aside. This is, generally speaking, in Hinduism and in class, I don't care what spelling you use, but there's a very important spelling that is necessary to outline here. Brahmin is the priestly class of social people. That's the first varna. That's M-I-N. Brahman is the ground of all being. That's what we're talking about now. Brahma, with the long A, is the creator God. And so here, spelling really makes a difference. It's one of the few instances in this course where I think spelling is essential, because it talks about very different things. However, if you want to spell Shiva with a SH or a S or a SHEEVA, that's all fine. Krishna can be spelled another way, but Brahman is one you really need to get the spelling right. Okay, so let's get back to it. Brahman is the source of all being. It's timeless, it's unchanging, it's pervasive, it's imperceptible. But here's the issue when we talk about Brahman. And pay attention here. Humans have very limited minds. We have very limited experiences. Even the smartest among us could not conceptualize something that created the billion galaxies, who designed the whole systems of the human body that sustains everything in the universe. Our mind cannot wrap ourselves around such a thing. And so humans will always fall short of describing Brahman adequately. You can't say this about Brahman without somehow distorting it. Listen to what one of a famous Hindu scriptural writing says. This immutable Brahman is that. Is neither gross nor minute, neither short nor long, neither red color nor oiliness, neither shadow nor darkness, neither air nor ether, unattached, neither savor nor odor, without eyes, ears, without vocal organ or mind, non-luminous, without vital force or mouth, not of measure, without interior exterior. It does not eat anything, nor is it eaten by anything. In other words, whatever human language you use to describe Brahman is ultimately going to fall short. In fact, some say the best description is this: neti neti. that is not this, not that. In other words, whatever human language I use to describe Brahman is ultimately going to fall short. In fact, language, reason is ultimately going to fall short when discovering Brahman. Now, this again is a statement of epistemology, not metaphysics. You're not saying that Brahman is void or lack or empty. You do see that similar language in Buddhism, but that's not what we're saying here. All it's saying is that the human mind, being so limited, will never be able to fully conceive of what Brahman is. That we cannot wrap our minds around the source behind everything. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't say that Brahman exists. For example, if you see ripples in the water coming out from something, you know something dropped there, but you don't know what that thing might be that dropped there. So likewise with Brahman, we can see the effects of Brahman and presuppose that there's something there. It's like if there's a box and you shake the box, you know something's in it without knowing precisely what it is. Now, there have been some attempts to define Brahman positively. Well, the most famous is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat is pure being. Chit is pure consciousness. Ananda is pure bliss. And I get that. Okay, Brahman is pure being, pure consciousness, pure bliss. But I think they all beg the question, okay, then what's pure being? What is pure consciousness? What is pure bliss? So this is an attempt that people have used. I don't think it's the best one. The best one is to say that maybe Brahman is just the buzz of the universe. And this is the sound Om. Om is not a word. It's just a sound that represents the energy that is Brahman. It's sort of like the cosmic buzz of the universe. And people speak of it as sort of like the original vibration of the universe that grounds the universe. And so for many Hindus, Om represents Hinduism. And if there's ever like a coexist bumper sticker, this this Sanskrit character Om represents Hinduism, because the fundamental insight of much of modern Hinduism is there is a source in the universe, a cosmic energy that pervades all things. And so if you're going to use a term to describe Brahman positively, you should just use the term Om. And when you Om together, and we could do this as a class, though it's very hard since we're not all together, we just go Om. If you could feel that, that is the cosmic energy of the universe. But again, there's no personal sense to Brahman. Brahman's not a god, it's impersonal. It's an impersonal force in the universe. Brahman doesn't care if you praise Brahman. You don't have to cheer for Brahman. Brahman is just always there, part of reality. Now, the two fundamental questions of the universe have now been solved. Who are you? You are an Atman. What is behind everything in the world? It is Brahman. So, on your blank sheet of paper where you spent time trying to conceive of what's behind everything in the world, you can just cross that out and write Brahman. And you would think that Hinduism would just sit there and rest on its laurels. It just solved the two fundamental questions of reality. But it didn't stop there. It then asked, how are these two related? How is Atman related to Brahman? And they came to the realization that they are the same, that thou art that. And this is the most important sentence in all of Hinduism. Tat Tavam Asi. That is, thou art that. That your Atman is Brahman. That they're two sides of the same coin. Or if you get out that scratch paper that you wrote your answers into, look at it. They're two sides of the same piece of paper. They're just two ways of looking at the world that are similar to one another, or that are the same from different perspectives. Now, of course, theoretically, this makes sense. How could something, if Brahman is the source behind everything, wouldn't also the Brahman have to be the source behind you? But getting our minds wrapped around this notion that your spiritual essence is identical to the energy that pervades everything is the hardest thing that humans can do. And so let me use an analogy that I have found useful. Do you remember the light brights? Light brights were, I don't know, activities, toys, whatever they were when we were kids. And how a light bright works is there's a black sheet of paper and you have all these little pegs. And you push these little pegs in the black sheet of paper, and they get illuminated the different colors of the peg. But here's how a light bright works. If you look at the edge of your screen, you'll see that there's a single light behind everything. In other words, you just pushed a bulb in back of a light bright, and the light plays on this side. Okay, so how does this help us describe Atman and Brahman? In the following way. When we are on this side of existence, we look at our life as a peg, and we spend most of our energy developing our peg, placing our peg in a specific spot vis-a-vis others, decorating our peg in this color or that color, trying to make our peg bigger or more beautiful or better. And all of our life is spent on this side of existence developing our peg. But the point of the spiritual life is to go within and discover a common light within. That is, once we look at the source of our light, we come to realize that we share the same light as everybody else. And so Tat Tavam Asi means that that peg, the illumination of that peg, is actually the light itself. Now, on this side of a tradition of the world, our pegs are different. My peg is bigger or different colored or more beautiful or less beautiful, taller, slighter, have a different social position. Those are all real differences. But if each of us goes within and searches for the light, we discover the same light. And this means to harm the light within me is to harm the light within you. The ethics of this is really interesting. And what it means is that in the end, we are all one. We're all the same light. Once we go within and discover the bulb within us, discover Brahman as the source, we come to realize that we're all one idea. And so the spiritual life is going from the peg side of existence to the bulb side of existence. And our spiritual deficit is we spend too much time on the peg side of of life. Now, when you think about this, you are the ground of all being. Within you lies all the power and energy of the universe if you just come to identify with it. This is the most exalted view of humanity that we could imagine, because if you think about how it works, whoever denies Brahman denies himself. Whoever denies himself denies Brahman, because they're one and the same in the path of insight within Hinduism. Now, this is quite different from other religions, because in most religions, for example, in Buddhism, they would say that you're ignorant about who you really are. You're by nature ignorant. When you look at Christianity, they would say our nature is fallen, that by nature we represent an imperfect state. Hinduism says no. You are by nature the very ground of the universe. You are the energy that pervades all things. You just need to shift your identification. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said, "This insight was most elevated in the world. It has been my solace in life, and it will be my solace in death." And it's hard to imagine a more exalted view of the world. Our challenge is to internalize it. That is, we can conceptually understand that we are Brahman, but we have spent a lifetime developing habits and ways of thinking that focus on the peg, that focus on my individuality and not the bulb. And the path of yoga, the path of insight, is to develop a series of tools to shift ourselves from the peg side of existence to the bulb side of existence, to shift us from thinking of ourselves as an ego and separate to identifying with Brahman within us. And the whole point of the way of insight is that we need to change the patterns of how we think so that we come no longer to identify with our ego, with our individuality, with our separateness, with our peg, but instead identify with Brahman. That's what we'll describe in the path of insight.